programming right now with some breaking news coming from The Ohio State University. Ted Carter Jr. announcing just moments ago he's resigning as the president of OSU, coming into our newsroom moments ago.
Now, according to a statement from OSU, the Ohio State University Board of Trustees accepted President Ted Carter's resignation because he had a, quote, inappropriate relationship. We want to bring in 10 TV's Kevin Landers now. Kevin, what do we know about this resignation based on what we're seeing so far?
What we know right now is this is the resignation right here, filed March 7th. This is from John Zeiger, the attorney for Ohio State. Let's go ahead and read what this statement says. In a statement from Ohio State University, it says the president recently disclosed to trustees that he had an inappropriate relationship with someone seeking public resources to support her personal business and offered to resign. The board appreciates the president's contributions to the university over the last 2 years. Obviously, there's a lot to read into this. We don't know exactly what those details are, what that relationship was, what was inappropriate about it, what resources this person was trying to seek. So at this point, there's a lot still to pull apart of this relationship, what it means. And obviously on Saturday, there was an executive session by the Board of Trustees. We now believe that that was the reason why they held that very unusual meeting on a Saturday. Obviously, it appears that this was to deal with Mr. Carter.
And we also heard, Kevin, from Ted Carter himself as part of that release, where he even said, for personal reasons, I have made that difficult decision to resign from my role. I mean, he was only here 2 short years, probably expecting to stay much longer. Here's the rest of what the president said. I disclosed to the Board of Trustees that I made a mistake in allowing inappropriate access to Ohio State leadership. And that's what a lot of people, Kevin, are trying to figure out. What does that mean? Like, that he actually gave this person inappropriate access to leadership?
Clearly, there's a rule within Ohio State about protocol regarding what you're allowed to do and how you're able to navigate certain resources at Ohio State. Obviously, someone brought this to their attention. OSU trustees acted immediately. What's interesting is that you see on John Zeiger's note here, this is dated March 7th. A day later, you had Ted Carter's resignation. So there's something we need to look at in terms of the date, why it wasn't immediate, why we didn't see the resignation the same day that OSU heard about it.
So March 7th would have been Saturday when they had that
meeting.
Very unusual Saturday meeting.
It appears A plus B equals C here, right? So this is what's happening right here. But clearly we're digging into this, trying to figure out exactly what happened, why it happened, and OSU obviously took immediate action.
But no word yet on what OSU is doing next, right? In
now
terms
the
of the
question
new
is-
search and so on and so forth.
That's right.
Okay.
So stay with us. We're going to keep going on 10 TV Plus for the latest continuing coverage. Download 10 TV Plus on your TV.
The quotes didn't come up back to back.
No.
That's why.
Right now, we are cutting into programming with some breaking news coming to us from The Ohio State University. The president, Ted Carter Jr., resigning over the weekend. This news coming into our newsroom just moments ago.
According to a statement from OSU, the Ohio State University Board of Trustees accepted President Ted Carter's resignation because he had a, quote, inappropriate relationship. 10 TV's Kevin Landers joining us. What do we know at this point about this resignation?
Yeah, so here is the resignation letter right here. This is dated March 7th. This is to John Zeiger, who is the president of the Ohio State Board of Trustees. He's the legal representative. It says, please accept this as an official notice of my resignation as president of the Ohio State University, effective March 7th. I am grateful for my time at Ohio State and appreciate the board's understanding. Sincerely, Ted Carter. So this was March 7th.
And we should note that was on a Saturday.
That's right.
When the board held this very unusual weekend-style meeting.
Right. We did not know what that executive session was. Now, the day later, this is the letter from March 8th. This is from John Zeiger, the president of the Board of Trustees. Says, on behalf of Board of Trustees, I accept your resignation as president of Ohio State University. The board was surprised and disappointed to learn of this matter and takes the situation and its potential impact on the university very seriously. We respect your decision and appreciate your cooperation in supporting an orderly leadership transition. Thank you for your service to Ohio State. I wish you both, you and Linda, the very best in the future. Now, President Carter was hired in 2023. He took office officially in January of 2024. In a statement from Ohio State University, it says, quote, the president recently disclosed to trustees that he had an inappropriate relationship with someone seeking public resources to support her personal business and offered to resign. The board appreciates the president's contributions to the university over the last 2 years. The Ohio State University says Ted Carter issued the following statement, quote, for personal reasons, I have made the difficult decision to resign from my role as president of the Ohio State University. I disclosed to the Board of Trustees that I made a mistake in allowing inappropriate access to Ohio State leadership. A lot to break down there in terms of what that inappropriate relationship was, who was the person that brought this forward to Ohio State, and then obviously Ohio State very quickly took action. But we don't know at what the time of when this was disclosed to the university.
Sure.
How long have they been sitting on this? Was it immediate? Is that why they took that Saturday executive session to make this the final recommendation to have him resign?
Well, and it's coming at a time where I think this is so shocking because his tenure was so short, right? Only 2 years, and it felt like President Carter was just starting to get things going at the university in terms of research and development. They had a record-breaking year when it comes to, I think, $1.65 billion raised, which is really unheard of. So when you have a president who's doing on the outside all the right things, this is really shocking.
And I think, you know, when President Carter was hired, there was some pushback from academia because he's not an academic.
Right.
Other prior presidents were. But clearly he had a lot of government experience. He's very highly decorated. He's was a retired vice admiral, and he obviously had many battles that he fought. He was an excellent airman.
Highly regarded.
Highly regarded,
Yeah.
very, very highly regarded. And they needed someone to sort of corral the university, someone who was very regimented in terms of dealing with all the different entities in Ohio State, and they felt he was the best person for the job. Clearly, this comes as a major shock to a huge university that is at one of the best in terms of, you know, raising money for research and development, all of that. Now the question is, who was going to go on to take this job in the middle of the year and the transition and try to find that appropriate person?
With some very big questions about procedures and some potential controversies with the university as well. And this is after what is regarded as a short tenure for the president before Ted Carter and Christina Johnson, who was only with the university for just a couple of years as well. So he really was hired as the person to right the ship, steady the ship, and keep things moving. And now all of that is kind of thrown into chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at, you know, Ted Carter comes in at a time when there is calls to remove Les Wexner's name from university buildings. That continues to go on. Now the university is dealing with this. I mean, it is clearly, you know, a very troubling time for the university, who have not been able to gain traction with the president for an extended period of time. Now, there was a time during COVID when people sort of assumed that a lot of people in leadership would leave early just because of the demands that COVID took, right? It was not just OSU presidents, it was the, you know, superintendents of schools as well.
Because Christina Johnson funneled the university
Correct.
through that moment.
Yeah,
Right.
right. And so it was not considered, that surprising that a university president would leave before their term was up. But this clearly is precedent setting to have a university president leave so abruptly like this.
Well, certainly so much more that we are going to discover and dig through today. So Kevin, thank you so much. I know you've got a lot to work on, so we're going to let you take a breather here for a moment, but we do know Ohio State is a huge part of our Central Ohio community. I mean, Buckeye pride is so strong through and through generations, and 10 TV has interviewed President Carter numerous times in the past 2 years.
One of those times in August of last year about growth and development at Ohio State. 10 TV's Colin Dorsey joining us now with more from that interview. Colin, tell us more.
Yeah, Stacia, Angela, I have sat down with President Carter multiple times, really since when he was first announced to the Board of Trustees in 2023 and when he took that seat officially in January of 24. And in this interview, President Carter said he was very proud to have the largest ever incoming class of freshmen during his time leading Ohio State. Now, the university reported nearly 10,000 freshman students joined OSU in 2024. Now, when we talked with President Carter last summer, he said he was shifting his focus from physical growth on campus to a growing impact in Ohio and across the country. Now, any of the other times that I have spoken with President Carter, he has talked about the legacy that Ohio State has carried throughout the years, and also, as Stacia mentioned, taking over from Christina Johnson and really being brought in to try to work with the Board of Trustees and all of that. This is what he had to say in that interview.
So I think about growth for Ohio State. It's more of growth of impact, growth in the type of excellence that we're doing in academics and research and clinical care. So that's the type of thing I think of in growth. It's growth in what we're doing and making a difference in the lives of Ohioans, what we're doing in preparing our students to go into the workforce and to be great citizens of the state of Ohio and for the United States.
Now, President Carter also called Ohio State an essential part of the state, saying the university generates more than $12 billion in revenue.
All right, Colin Dorsey reporting for us on this developing story. Again, if you're just joining us here on the stream, 10 TV Plus, we have learned that President Ted Carter Jr. has resigned as of this weekend from The Ohio State University.
And so we're still learning more about what led to this resignation. We do know that the Board of Trustees held an emergency meeting on Saturday, which is very unprecedented. This is not something that we normally see with the board meeting on a weekend. And so we did understand this statement right here. Dear students, faculty, and staff, I write to share that the Ohio State University Board of Trustees has accepted President Walter Ted Carter Jr.'s resignation. And you can see this email went out to faculty and staff from the Board of Trustees. So they accepted President Walter Ted Carter Jr.'s resignation. The president recently disclosed to trustees that he had an inappropriate relationship with someone seeking public resources to support her personal business and offered to resign. The board appreciates the president's contributions to the university over the last 2 years. The Education for Citizenship 2035 strategic plan, rising national rankings, growth in research expenditures, and multiple new scholarship programs, along with the team the president assembled, have elevated Ohio State's position as a national leader. Our collective dedication to advancing Ohio State's standing as one of the nation's premier public universities is unchanged. The current strength and momentum of Ohio State and its collective leadership team make us highly confident that our momentum will continue to be strong. You play a critical role in that mission, and we will share additional information about the transition in the coming days.
And as we continue to get new information about the president's resignation, this is what President Ted Carter, I suppose we should now say former President Ted Carter, addressed in his letter to the Board of Trustees, saying, for personal reasons, I have made the difficult decision to resign from my role as president of The Ohio State University. He goes on to say, I disclosed to the Board of Trustees that I made a mistake in allowing inappropriate access to Ohio State leadership. The president goes on to say, I believe we have made much progress during my time at Ohio State, and I'm sorry I'm not able to remain your president longer. The students, faculty, and staff at this university are among the very best in the world, and the Education for Citizenship 2035 strategic plan has Ohio State poised to succeed for years to come. So much that you can really unpack, Stacia, from what he's saying. Clearly, he had envisions of staying much longer as a Buckeye, and you can tell that he was proud of what he has accomplished, and that he did have a vision plan. You know, the strategic vision plan 2035 of creating a bigger, better world through Ohio State.
Well, and in previous interviews, my time speaking with him, he actually addressed the fact that he saw this as his last public-facing role, because he came from the University of Nebraska. Before that, he'd come from the U.S. Naval Academy and War College, and holding those positions of leadership. And he shared with me that he felt like he was training for this role as president of Ohio State for his entire life, and he really saw this as the last professional academic leadership role he would have. So many questions about what comes next for the university, especially when it sounds like, by all accounts, from now former President Ted Carter and the university as well, that they really saw him in a long-term role in this position. So this is very unexpected.
And you were talking about your conversations with him. I've interviewed him, and so many people had. And I think that was part of what also made him a little different, that people like to see. He was very accessible as a president, very open and very transparent. And again, former President Ted Carter was with the university for just over 2 years. Again, as you heard, joining in January 2024, and that long career that he had in the U.S. Navy. Let's talk with Colin Dorsey right now, because Colin, you even said that you had several opportunities to talk with him.
Right, really in the 2 years that he has been president of the Ohio State University, from really when he was first announced to the Board of Trustees in 2023 and then took office in January of 2024, he always talked about how important this role was, moving to the Ohio State University from the University of Nebraska, saying that he was ready to hit the ground running, also bringing in that experience from that long career in the U.S. Navy, retiring as a vice admiral.
We are a central part to all of Ohio. I mean, we're the largest employer in all of Central Ohio. We're number 4 in the entire state. So just our size, scale, scope is tremendous. I mean, we're a $12.5 billion revenue generating enterprise.
Yeah, and when he talks about that, Ohio State is really more than just a university to Ohio, Central Ohio, and the whole state. Now, we've sat down with President Carter back in August of 25 to talk about the impact the university has on the rapidly growing region. And this is what he told us about the university's role in shaping Central Ohio and as the whole state. So we are continuing to follow that, or I am at least. And Stacia, Angela, I've talked to the president probably no less than a dozen times in the last 2 years that he's been in that position. So, of course, a lot to dig through on that.
And you know, Colin, I know that you also have covered many boomtown related stories with Ohio State, talking with President Ted Carter at the time, where he talked about the workforce development with rising Buckeyes. He talked about AI and this AI fluency with students. I mean, what did you gather from him back then of what he wanted to do in the future? Yeah.
Angela, he really focused at that time, especially even when he came in, when he and I sat down for his first sit-down interview in January of 24, that Ohio State was going to be a big part of the future for the state as a whole, especially when it came to long-term degrees, saying that secondary or post-secondary degrees were going to see an uptick in the coming years, and a lot of that was going to be focused on that tech sector. Of course, we've seen in the past couple of years Ohio State really issue in this next wave, focusing on artificial intelligence. Just recently, last month, former President Ted Carter speaking at the Power Breakfast put on by Columbus Business First, then highlighting the importance that artificial intelligence will have in this region, and basically putting the Ohio State University at the forefront of that, that if OSU can get ahead of that boom, that can really cement OSU as being a really key player in that boom, especially for Central Ohio, as we've seen more and more of these data centers and the rise of AI come for Central Ohio.
Well, and one of the things that I spoke with him just days ago, we haven't even had a chance to share the story yet with the interview from now former President Ted Carter. Part of his goal in envisioning this future for Ohio State was bringing in as many veteran students as possible. He wanted to make Ohio State the #1 destination for military-connected students, specifically veterans, an issue personal to him as a veteran himself, as a retired vice admiral, but also acknowledging the key character components that we associate with veteran students. And so this was an initiative that he was bringing everybody on board to accomplish and making this a university-wide opportunity to bring in more student veterans. And so having spoken with him literally just days ago, you really get the sense that there were a lot of goals and a lot of things he still felt that he saw for the future, that he was working towards in the future. So having this happen with all of these goals in place and getting all these folks on board with this growth for the university and the boomtown angles that I know that you've spoken with him many times, there are still things that are up in the air about where those goals now stand.
And I think that's the big question mark, right? As we're waiting to hear from OSU leadership now, how are they going to move forward? What does this transition look like? And all those projects, the ones you talked about, the boomtown, the AI fluency, certainly we don't want that to come to a screeching halt, but there's going to be a pause in this. But we should say that this news is traveling fast, and talk about a fast reaction to whatever transpired that led to this emergency meeting of the Board of Trustees on Saturday, and within a day, Ted Carter resigns, and today we get the announcement that he is no longer the president of the university. Let's bring in Kevin Landers again, because Kevin, I know that you are continuing to look through the letter that Carter wrote to the board, what the board said. There's so much you can read between the lines. Right. But I'll tell you, unless my Google skills have failed me, he's no longer, his bio is not even on their website anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we can all agree is that now there will be a transitional period where Ohio State will hire an interim president. It will be business as usual until they find someone. Or
vice provost or somebody to put
in.
Yeah.
So let's go through the document. So we have this from March 7th, right here, this document here, and this is from Ted Carter. So this was Saturday. Now remember, it's important to know, why is Saturday important? Because Saturday is when the OSU Board of Trustees held a very unusual meeting. We did not know what that was about. Now we begin to know this is why they had that meeting. So it says, this is from Ted Carter to John Zeiger, the chairman of the OSU Board of Trustees, saying, please accept this as my official notice of my resignation as president of Ohio State University effective March 7th. I'm grateful for my time at Ohio State and appreciate the board's understanding. A day later, we get this letter here. This letter here, March 8th, this is from Ohio State, and this is from John Zeiger, the chairman of Ohio State's Board of Trustees, saying, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I accept your resignation as president of Ohio State. The board was surprised and disappointed to learn of this matter and takes the situation and its potential impact on the university very seriously. We respect your decision and appreciate your cooperation in supporting an orderly leadership transition. Thank you for your service to Ohio State. I wish both you and Linda, his wife, the very best in the future. Now, Ted Carter was the 17th president of Ohio State, and I thought it was interesting when you look at the university statement that they sent out to us just this morning. It said, I disclosed to the Board of Trustees that I made a mistake in allowing inappropriate access to Ohio State leadership. So what can we learn from that? It sounds to me, and I may be wrong, but this is how I would interpret that, is that Ted Carter was the one who brought this to their attention, as opposed to the woman who he had this inappropriate relationship with. At least that's how I view it. So apparently he came forward to Ohio State and disclosed that. What we don't know is when he did that. Was that disclosure made on Saturday when they had the executive session? Was it made a few days before? Obviously, they had to hold this executive session very immediately
to make a decision.
They had to get all the board members together. So maybe it was a day before, maybe it was that day it happened. Right. We don't know. We're still trying to figure out exactly how all this transpired. But it appears to me that former President Ted Carter was the one who brought this to the attention of Ohio State.
And the word he used, I think, is what has given so many people pause. People who know his history, his military history. You know, he's so big on leadership. And the book he wrote, From Cockpit to Boardroom, right? All about the leadership decisions he made that got him so successful. But to use the word, I made a mistake. I mean, that's probably not a word that is common in his own vocabulary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, he came in as such a highly decorated military person of incredible integrity, right? Ohio State, you know, saw that as obviously something that they wanted to instill in the university's leadership, right, because of some of the other issues that they've had in the past. And they thought this guy, considering his decorated military career, was probably untouchable in terms of his integrity. And that means so much to the university. And to have what he called a mistake, we don't know to the extent of how big this mistake was,
yeah.
right? We don't know that. We can only read what they provide us at this point. But obviously, this was something Ohio State said, enough is enough. We cannot afford to have this. And Ohio State obviously is embroiled in so much controversy right now with Les Wexner's name and all these other investigations that are going on, including Dr. Strauss. That still hasn't gone away.
Correct.
They could not afford to have a third, which in fact they do really. They do have a third problem now, is it finding a new president.
In the leadership transition.
Yep. And he said he's the 17th president. He was the 17th president,
yep.
which is, you can tell that the Board of Trustees had hoped for longevity because OSU has been around for more than 200 years. So to only be the 17th president, there was time for him to be here.
Right. And Ohio State is, being the university that they are, so academically well known around the world, it's not going to be hard to find the next person. The question is, what kind of person do they want? How do they avoid another mistake? And how do they keep this transition from not going, every 2 years, which is really unusual for an Ohio State University president. Yeah.
And 10 TV's Doug Pekash is on campus. He's been out there at the Oval talking to students about their reaction. Doug joining us live now. Doug, with this news breaking less than an hour ago, what are you hearing from students at this point?
Well, actually, Stacia, we just got here a few minutes ago, so we haven't had a chance to talk to students just yet. We are definitely going to see if we can talk to a few right after this. But we wanted to focus on an email that John Zeiger, the chair of the Board of Trustees, sent out to students, faculty, and staff. It came out just around 10 o'clock, maybe a little bit later than 10 o'clock this morning. I want to read to you what he had to say to the students, faculty, and staff here. He writes, "I write to share that the Ohio State University Board of Trustees has accepted President Walter Ted Carter Jr.'s resignation. The president recently disclosed to trustees that he had an inappropriate relationship with someone seeking public resources to support her personal business and offered to resign." So Ted Carter offered to resign, as Kevin mentioned. "The board appreciates the president's contributions to the university over the last 2 years. The Education for Citizenship 2035 strategic plan, rising national rankings, growth in research expenditures, and multiple new scholarship programs, along with the team the president assembled, have elevated Ohio State's position as a national leader." Zeiger goes on to say, "Our collective dedication to advancing Ohio State's standing as one of the nation's premier public universities is unchanged. The current strength and momentum of Ohio State and its collective leadership team make us highly confident that our momentum will continue to be strong. You play a critical role in that mission, and we will share additional information about the transition in the coming days." So as the Board of Trustees deals with this sudden situation with Ted Carter resigning, they are also now looking to the future, how to deal with this transition and move forward here at Ohio State University. As I mentioned, we're going to try to talk to students here in just a few minutes, and we'll hear what they're saying coming up a little bit later on 10 TV. Angela and Stacia?
Yeah, Doug Pekash live for us there at Ohio State. I mean, you got to imagine in many ways it is business as usual for the majority of individuals on campus today, even with this huge news, learning of the resignation of President Ted Carter. But for the most part, you can see even behind Doug, people are walking to class. People are just going and continuing education as normal on a day where this news has come to be so large to start the week. But again, as we discuss this leadership transition, while today may feel in many ways like business as usual, this is going to have huge impacts in a leadership transition for this university.
Absolutely. And no doubt Ted Carter is right now reflecting a lot because someone of his stature, of his experience, people are probably saying, if he allowed this person to have inappropriate access to leadership, there are protocols in place that prevent this from happening. As a president of a major university, you should know that, need to know that, and clearly he admitted to the board, I didn't do that, hence his resignation. But for him to say business as usual, his last line, we wish the university ongoing success. So he knows that OSU will recover from this at some time and move on and move ahead. Let's continue our team coverage right now. We do have 10 TV's Colin Dorsey. Colin, you are standing by because obviously as this news broke, you started digging back into the archives, looking back at your conversations with the now former president.
Yeah, Angela, really in the 2 years, or really more than 2 years, that I've talked with former President Ted Carter about his role with that university, he's always said that he's felt prepared to steer that university and whatever the future direction is. And of course, we've talked over and over about how Central Ohio is growing, especially in the tech sector. And it is a subject and it's a reason that we've sat down with President Carter with time and time again. And he says he gives OSU a lot of credit for the region's continued success. And this is what he had to say about that here recently.
The most important part about resilience is being able to admit that we as humans are going to have failures. And we're going to have a lot of them. Some of them will be small, some of them will be big. How you respond to that failure, and it's really about the learning from the mistake so that you don't either continue to repeat it or it becomes a bigger mistake. That's what that's all about.
And just 2 years ago, remember, the university has been growing. The university welcomed its largest freshman class ever at nearly 10,000 students. Former President Carter then told us that he was proud of that growth, but his focus was on making sure the university's impact reaches all four corners of the state and from coast to coast across the country. Right now, as we've kept saying, we do not know who will take over as president or what direction the plan to take the university in is after this.
Colin Dorsey joining us live in the studio with that piece of interview from just days ago with now former President Ted Carter from Ohio State University, speaking to resilience, which is a big theme in the book that he just recently wrote with Jack Stark about Top Gun performance in the cockpit to the boardroom. Resilience is a key component of that, and that's something that I know that he was looking to instill in the students of Ohio State and instill in the faculty of Ohio State. And you hope that the resilience that he speaks to, that we're going to see that in this process, in this leadership transition. That's what's going to have to happen.
Buckeye strong. We should note that when he was hired in 2023 to start his term in January of 2024, it was supposed to be a full 4 years. His term did not end until December 31st of 2028. And so it'll be interesting to see now contractually what Ohio State may or may not have to pay out for the rest of his contract, given that he admitted, quote, I made a mistake. So we'll look into that. But, you know, to be the president of a massive university, 6 campuses, 65,000 students strong, to your point about resilience, we're going to see how strong that Buckeye Nation is through this.
Truly. And so as we learn about the impacts for this, you mentioned that you'd already seen his bio is no longer even on the university website. Looking on X, formerly Twitter, I can still see Walter Ted Carter Jr. as at Ohio State Pres, official account of the 17th president of Ohio State. So he's still listed there, tweeting 2 days ago that we're grateful to Kokosing for the tremendous investment in faculty, students, and future alumni that will help develop Ohio's workforce for generations to come. So literally just posting 2 days ago about those investments in Ohio State's future.
On the day that he had the Board of Trustees had the emergency meeting.
That's right.
Timing is so interesting. So in a conversation with 10 TV anchor Jeff Hogan, this happened in September of 2025, so just last fall, they were talking about the importance of understanding your community and communicating with them while also leading. Take a listen.
As an athlete, I can say this to you, it's a contact sport. It really is. And you better understand how to deal with all of your constituencies. As you point out, you've got the General Assembly, you've got state legislatures, you've got federal, but you've also got to be able to deal with students, faculty, staff, parents, alumni, the sports element. There's a lot. And if you let your eye off any of those spinning plates for a little while, it stops and it'll break. And that's the danger right now. Yes, there's a lot of changes. You got to be able to keep up with it. And you got to be a pretty decent communicator and be able to know that this is not a popularity contest. You know, I've had to make some pretty hard decisions. I get criticized. But, you know, I wore the cloth of the nation for 38 years as a naval officer.
So you just heard a snippet of Ted Carter Jr. speaking with 10 TV back in fall of 2025. talking about the future. And he really had a vision for the future. He had this Education for Citizenship 2035. This was his idea of how to grow Ohio State in the next decade. He also really pushed AI fluency with students, and not just students, but also faculty. So he had big dreams for Ohio State.
And we are learning now what that's going to look like, how those initiatives will continue, since he was very much the catalyst for those initiatives, and how those continue, because it would seem that everyone agreed these were good priorities to focus on, but with that catalyst now resigning from his role as president of the university, we will see how those things continue and who the next leader will be and what their initiatives might be, because he was truly regarded as someone who was different. And 10 TV's Kevin Landers brought this up earlier, that when Ted Carter was initially announced as the next president of Ohio State, there was a lot of shock because he did not have a deep research university background as a naval officer for decades, and then moving into the University of Nebraska for about 4 years as president there. He was regarded as kind of a breaker of what you assume for a president to have in their resume, that we didn't understand, we didn't see exactly what that looked like, or we weren't quite sure what that would look like as he continued in that leadership role, because his background was so different, and so really kind of broke the mold on what you assume a university president would look like in their resume.
Well, and I think maybe that is the intent, that was the intent of the Board of Trustees. They wanted a disruptor, somebody new making a splash and making it big. And to your point, he didn't have that research and development background, but boy, did he bring in the dollars. They broke a record for R&D last fiscal year of $1.65 billion. And that's at a time where we saw funding for schools getting cut left and right.
Yes.
He was still able to bring in that money for the Ohio State.
So at this point, once again, breaking news today that Walter Ted Carter Jr. has resigned from Ohio State University as the 17th president of the university.
So we're going to continue our coverage here on 10 TV Plus for a moment. We're going to take a quick break as we also move on to 10 TV. Stay with us. We're breaking into programming right now with this breaking news. If you're just joining us, about an hour ago, we learned that President Ted Carter Jr. of The Ohio State University resigned over the weekend as OSU's 17th president.
Again, just an hour ago, learning this information, according to a statement from OSU, the Ohio State University Board of Trustees accepted President Ted Carter's resignation because he had a, quote, inappropriate relationship, and we're working to learn more about what that means and what happens next in what will be an impactful leadership transition. We're going to bring in 10 TV's Kevin Landers, who has been looking into what we know about this resignation so far.
And really a flurry of letters that we're seeing from Ted Carter, the Board of Trustees, and a lot of other people too.
Right. It seems very clear now that the Saturday Board of Trustees meeting was exactly for this discussion. Based on the letters we have. As a matter of fact, here's one, March 7th. This was Saturday. This was a letter sent to us from Ohio State. This is from Ted Carter, where he says, please accept this official notice of my resignation as president of Ohio State University effective March 7th. A day later, we get this letter here. This is from John Zeiger, the chairman of Ohio State, where he says, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I accept your resignation as president of Ohio State. The board was surprised and disappointed to learn of this matter and takes the situation and its potential impact on the university very seriously. In a statement from the Ohio State University, it says, quote, the president recently disclosed to trustees that he had an inappropriate relationship with someone seeking public resources to support her personal businesses and offered to resign. The board appreciates the president's contributions to the university over the last 2 years. The Ohio State University says Ted Carter issued the following statement, quote, for personal reasons, I have made the difficult decision to resign from my role as president of Ohio State. So there you have the statements. Now the question is, where does Ohio State move on from here for the next 18th president of Ohio State?
And we will find out what that transition is going to look like.
Yep.
Kevin, thank you.
Kevin, thank you so much. We're going to send you back to your regular programming right now, but our crews will continue to get reaction. We'll see you at noon.